Hello everyone, welcome to another battle report. Now before we get into it, I am going to ask you to hit that like and subscribe button if you've not done so already, please. So, 4,500 points of Vampire Covenants against Warriors of the Dark Gods. I'm on the Vampire Covenants. I've made some fairly sweeping changes to my list. I feel like I'm starting to get the hang of them now. And my good friend Silas is on the Warriors of the Dark Gods. In a moment, I will flash up the army lists, as always, so that you can take a quick look and pause if you want to, and then we will get into deployment. Okay, so here we are in deployment then. We got map number 4, and the deployment type was counter thrust with the secondary objective of capture the flags. So you can see the marked units here, here, and just underneath the icon there on my side. Those veil token markers are going to change for red crosses later. And Silas is here, here, and here. Now, Silas would choose the deployment zone, and he would choose to go at the bottom, which would mean that I'd be forced to go up at the top, but it would give me the chance to deploy first and ensure the first turn. So that's what I did. I knew that I had this house here, and I knew I had some quite soft, squishy scoring troops, although I'm going to try and buff those up. So I deployed sort of around this area here, trying to use this impassable terrain as a bit of a shield from the flank up here. Silas has tried to negate that by deploying the majority of his army in this bottom left corner, and is obviously going to try for this sort of sweeping flank maneuver, but it has left one of his scoring units a little bit vulnerable over here, I feel. Anyway, let's go through the units. So we'll start on my side with a Varkalok and 3 Vampire Knights, unit of Direwolves, unit of Wraiths, Giant Bats, unit of Skeletons with a Vampire count, unit of Skeletons with Halberds and 3 Banshees, 2 units of Zombies, one of which contains the Necromancer you can see just there, another unit of Wraiths, another unit of Direwolves, another unit of Vampire Knights, and another Varkalok. On Silas's side, unit of Warrior Knights, unit of Barbarians with Great Weapons, Feldrek Elder, Marauding Giant, Forsaken One, big unit of Flayers, Chosen Lord on a Dark Chariot, small unit of Flayers, big unit of Barbarians with Great Weapons, you can see a Sorcerer just there, and a unit of Warrior Knights. So that's deployment. Okay, so a quick vanguard here then. Unfortunately, I chopped off the bottom of Silas's army, which I felt was an effective way to get rid of his giant. So apologies for that. The giant is back there, and the board goes on for a good few inches off the bottom there. Anyway, vanguards. So I vanguarded with my dogs. I've brought my dogs sideways a little bit here. I felt I'd deployed them quite poorly with the impassable terrain in the way, and they're not light troops, so I just went 6 inches sideways, and then I brought these other dogs up here. I know I've got the first turn, so I'm planning to use the dogs to chaff up the knights and give my troops on the side here enough time to close them down, really. And then Silas has vanguarded ever so slightly with one of his units here, and I think he just nudged the other one there. So there you go, that's vanguards. Okay, so on to my turn 1 here then, and as I mentioned before, Silas had deployed in this bottom left corner, so it's a bit of a sort of a curving arc around the side here. Bringing the Skeletons with Halberds up here at the moment. I'm not sure whether Silas will bear off with this unit in this direction, or whether he'll try and bring everything around the side, so just sort of arcing around to meet the threat, really. Dogs, as mentioned before, chaffing up these knights so that the Vampire Knights and the Varkalok have got time to close them down. I have activated my Banner of the Relentless Company, flinging out my 3 Banshees, but I couldn't get all 3 in range of this unit of Flayers. Of course, I've only got an 8-inch shot here, and this from this second one here is exactly 8 inches. So I've had to put these two together as a unit so that they fire at the same time, so as to guarantee that both of their shots land. And then I've decided to send this one off separately and start bothering these knights. I don't expect it to do much to the knights, but if it kills one, that's a bonus, really. So yeah, there you go. That is my movement 1. Okay, so end of my turn 1 here then. In the magic phase, I got the Dead Arise and brought up another unit of zombies here. So my thought process here was that this zombie unit, although the marker has disappeared from the subsequent cast of Arise, this is one of the units that Silas is targeting. Now, what I'm kind of doing here is thinking ahead, creating an extra bunker so that should he get in a position where he can threaten this unit, at least my Necromancer can go and jump ship and go and hide over here. So that's why there's an extra unit there. Then I got off a copy of Arise and buffed all of these units in this area here. So starting to swell a little bit. I even got a Wraith from that, which I was quite happy about. And unfortunately, my 2 Banshees only did 4 wounds on the Flayers. 2d6 plus 4, strength 4 hits with AP 1. I was expecting to take out all 5, but I rolled 3 1s amongst my 2 wound rolls, so that was a bit annoying. Anyway, 4 down, 1 to go, and that was the end of my turn 1. Okay, on to Silas's movement 1 here then. And he didn't declare any charges. I had wondered whether he would try for a charge with the Barbarians on the Banshees. They were 13 inches away, so he would have needed a 9 on 2d6, which is unlikely but not impossible, and maybe worth the chance of a failed charge, really, because the Banshees would be smashed. Anyway, he didn't. He decided to drop the Flayers there, but between some poor to wound rolls and the Banshees 3+ Aegis, he didn't even manage to do a single wound on the Banshees, which was a bit disappointing for him, really. The other Flayer chaffing up the Vampire Knights over here, and then quite a heavy commitment, I feel, on this Varkalok, trying to take out the Varkalok over here. But some good play over here as well, backing off from the dogs, using the hill to block line of sight from the Vampire Knight and the Varkalok. So playing a good delay game over here. The Forsaken one got a bit bottled in with his random movement, so I think that could have perhaps been deployed a bit more effectively. Anyway, that was the end of Silas's movement 1. Okay, on to Silas's end of turn 1 then, and in the magic phase he got the Grave Calls off on the Banshees and inflicted 5 wounds on them, but in so doing he got quite a high roll with a miscast and caused a single wound on his wizard as well. The roll was so high that I didn't really have any real prospect of stopping it, so I decided to protect my Banshee from the breath weapon later on and let that one go through. Anyway, so a few wounds on the Banshees and a wound on the wizard. That's the end of Silas's turn 1. Okay, on to my movement 2 here then, and there's just been the 1 charge, which has been the Dire Wolves at the 1 remaining Flayer that you can see over here. Besides that, I've moved the Banshees into position over here. I've probably got a little bit too close to the impassable terrain there, actually, but it was easily in range for a march, so I don't think it has made any difference. They should perhaps be another inch this way, maybe. Anyway, so the Banshees have gone there, chaffing again with the Dire Wolves and then bringing the Varkalok around here, so that if he doesn't charge the Dire Wolves, the Varkalok can close down the Knights, and if he does charge the Dire Wolves, then the Vampire Knights can get in on him. So one way or another way, we're kind of closing the gap down here. Brought the Wraiths out into the middle because there's nothing here that can charge or get to them, but they're kind of in the way of the swelling that will happen as the units will, the units over here will be arisen. And then over here, using the presence of this Feldrek Elder and the line of sight to kind of protect my Varkalok from the multiple charges that could go on here, we actually determined that it was impossible for the Varkalok to be charged by this Feldrek Elder because it would go off the board, and impossible to be charged by the Giant because he couldn't make contact with the flank because of the presence of this Feldrich Elder. So trying to kind of use the positions of Silas's units against him a little bit, really. And then it looks like Silas is heading round this way with his main force, so I've reformed the Halberdier skeletons here so that as they come around I'll be able to flank charge them, is the idea. That's the end of my movement 2. Okay, end of my turn 2 here then, and you can see that I've pulled off another Dead Arise with this unit of zombies here, trying to create a meat shield really. So what I'm thinking here is I'm going to secure this secondary objective by killing off this unit and then protect all of my own, and then just shave off bits from Silas's army, and sort of go for a 12-8 or a 13-7 is what I'm looking at right now, because it's quite a nasty army that he's got really. So that's kind of a rough game plan. And then I've done 6 wounds on the flayers from the Banshee Shrieks over here, but in this combat over here my dogs did no wounds on the flayer, as you can see, and it did no wounds back. I won combat by 1 and the flayer held, so that was pathetic really. Yeah, and that was the end of my turn 2. I'm feeling I'm lacking a bit of damage projection by the end of turn 2. I'm not able to really inflict any harm from range, so I'm kind of thinking about that with my army list. Anyway, that's the end of my turn 2. Okay, Silas's movement 2 here then. You can see that there have been no charges, but there are just pieces everywhere all over the board. It looks like a splatter pattern, doesn't it? So there's a general move around the side here, sort of around this anchoring piece of impassable terrain. He's moved his general to see the Banshees here. He's obviously going to try for a Lightning Vambraces, which is a magical attack, and try and zap off the Banshees that he doesn't really like. Heading round the side with his Feldrech Elders, which are going to be a bit of a threat, and some Barbarians perhaps following them up. And then he's got his Forsaken one over here, obviously heading in this direction to meet the threat of the Varkalok here, and again playing the delay game with his knights, and at least kind of luring some counterpoints back in if the Forsaken one can get into combat with the Varkalok. That's the end of Silas's movement 2. Okay, end of Silas's movement 2 here then, and you can see that his flayers have come up on the side of the wraiths here and have tried to lash again and have failed to do any wounds again. So that was pretty poor from them. And then in the magic phase, he got Breath of Corruption off. He also tried to cast Lightning Vambraces, and I thought, you know what, I know Lightning Vambraces is going to be bound. So I know that the value, I don't know what he's going to do with Breath of Corruption. So I decided to dispel Lightning Vambraces and take my chances with Breath of Corruption, but he did breathe off 1 Banshee, although it only, I think, had 1 wound left. But the other one is alive because they had separated previously, so that's okay. And then in combat over here, the dogs actually lost by 1 and started to pop, so that was a bit disappointing. And that was the end of Silas's turn 2. Okay, on to my movement 3 then. So a charge from the Varkalak on these warrior knights. This is important for the secondary objective. We'll see what happens over here. Using the Feldrech Elder to protect this Varkalak over here, and then hoping to get into these knights thereafter. And the wraiths have taken out what was left of the flayers with their sweeping attack, so beating them at their own game. Struggling with these vampire knights here. There's no real eligible charge other than the barbarians, but they'd be steadfast, and then I'd get flank charged by a Feldrech Elder, so that doesn't seem like a good idea. So I'm just going to hope that this flayer survives combat and messes up Silas's subsequent possible charges. And then the wraiths and the Banshee coming over here to bother the barbarians. That's the end of my movement 3. Okay, end of my turn 3 here then. And in the magic phase, I got off a Breath of Corruption on my champion in this unit here. So I'm hoping to use that should Silas get into combat with me later on. The Banshees and the Wraiths did 9 wounds on the Barbarians, which was very silly because now, of course, this Forsaken one could, if it so wished, come and charge me here. And then the knights broke against the Varkolok, but fled 11 inches, and the Varkolok only chased 9, so didn't manage to get them, but still progress over here. And then the dogs did their maximum possible wounds. So the one time I want them to perform badly, they actually perform like heroes, which is typical. So there's a clear path there now for Silas's Feldrek elders to move through. Oh, that's annoying. Right, that's the end of my turn 3. Okay, on to Silas's movement 3 here then. You can see that one of the Feldrek elders has got into combat with my 3 vampire knights, and then the barbarians and the other Feldrek elder are going to smash through the dogs, although I had reformed the dogs at the end of my turn so that the overruns would head towards the impassable terrain and just open space here. So they're positioned quite deliberately. The Forsaken one has got into the Wraiths. That's a problem of my own making. That's quite poor play on my part, really. And the Warrior Knights have rallied with the giant heading in this direction to support them. That's the end of Silas's movement 3. Okay, on to Silas's turn 3 here then. And I must give Silas an enormous amount of credit for sheer bravery here. As you can see, he was on Flux card 1 and he 5-diced Breath of Corruption to ensure that he got it. Yeah, that's an interesting thing about playing against Silas. You know that he is willing to take high-risk moves, and it makes you more cautious against him. It's a real feature of his play, so yeah, hats off for sheer bravery there. So he got Breath of Corruption. The Wraiths lost combat against the Forsaken one over here, but one survived. The Feldrek, with his Breath of Corruption, actually failed to break the Knights. There was a draw over here, which was quite disappointing from Silas's point of view, quite naturally. But the Feldrek over here and the Warriors smashed the dogs, as you would expect them to. And that was the end of Silas's turn 3. Okay, on to my movement 4 here then, and you can see both Varkoloks have got in on the Knights, and this is good news, I feel, because these are 2 of Silas's 3 marked units, and the Varkoloks are going in with 5 Strength 6 Hatred attacks, as well as a Stomp. And I don't think that Silas is going to be able to get through all of these marked units over here. It's too late in the game. So I'm feeling pretty positive here. I think I'm going to get the secondary objective. Elsewhere in this turn, the Vampire Knights have charged in here to try and rescue this Banshee. Now, Vampire Knights are savage, but so are Forsaken ones, so I'm not sure how that's going to go at this stage. Wraith's coming up here to start some Reaper attacks against this Feldrek Elder over here. Yeah, and that was about it for my movement phase, other than to say, at this point I decided to move my Vampire and my Necromancer into this middle unit here. Why did I do this? Well, I don't know whether you will have seen my last battle report where my Vampire got taken out by some stray dice rolls, and my entire army started to crumble, and it was a huge loss of points, and perhaps that's had a bit of a knock-on effect on my thought process in this game. But what I'm thinking is, it's currently turn 4. Silas is going to have to get through these Vampire Knights, get through these zombies, and then get through a whole truckload of skeletons with parry over here that I'm going to keep on buffing with magic. So what I've decided to do is move the Vampire over, because I don't think Silas is going to be able to just crunch through the sheer number of these units. So I'm playing for the secondary objective. I'm keeping my Vampire safe. Keeping him out of unnecessary harm is basically the idea, partly informed by my last game, I think. So yeah, there you go. That's the end of my movement 4. Okay, on to my turn 4 here then. Really poor return in the magic phase. I only managed to get off touch of the Reaper, which caused one hit on the general, but that was discarded by the Weirdstone. But the Wraiths at least did 4 wounds on the Elder, so that was a bit of an overperformance. They should have done 2. So I suppose that makes up for the magic phase. 3 wounds from the Banshees on the Barbarians. And then on the right side of the board, the Varkalak beat the Knights again, who fled, and you can see they are about 1 millimetre off the edge of the board here. There is the tiniest sliver of green there. It is correct, it is legal, but I'm really disappointed with that because the Giant is bearing down, and I've beaten them twice and chased them twice and hit them with 10 attacks and 2 stomps. One way or another, they should be dead by now. So that's frustrating. And then to add insult to injury over here, the Varkalak hit 4 times, which is about average with his hatred and his offense, and then rolled 3 out of 4 ones to wound. And if this unit had broken, it had been straight off. So that was really poor, and that ended up being a draw over there. In the middle of the board, this Forsaken one pommeled the Knights, the Vampire Knights, so no, Vampire Knights cannot take on Forsaken ones, at least not in units of 3, FYI. And over here, the Feldrek Elder finished off the Vampire Knights in the middle, but at least the Vampire Knights inflicted a wound in the process. So a quite unsuccessful turn 4 overall from my point of view, really. Okay, into Silas's movement 4 here then, and you can see he's got off quite a few charges. He's got his 2 Feldrek Elders and his Lord into this zombie unit here, which of course will crumble very quickly. He's got his Barbarians coming in here to support the Warrior Knights against the Varkalok, and his Giant has got a flank charge on the Varkalok over here as well. Right, that's the end of Silas's movement 4. Okay, on to Silas's turn 4 here then, and I should have mentioned in the last clip that the Warrior Knights actually failed to rally and ran off the board down here, so their luck has sort of run out a little bit, but I think the fact that they're dead is fair given how much they've been chased and pounded. Combat over here, the Varkalak did a few wounds on the Knights, but ultimately succumbed to the ranks and great weapons and charge and flank and everything else over here. Now, the combat with the Giant and the Varkalak down here was really quite comical because the Giant, it turns out, is not a particularly good model to chase down a Varkalak who is hitting him on 2s or 3s with hatred and then wounding him on 3s, and the Giant also, of course, can't thunderstomp him because he's large. So the Giant actually lost combat, fled from the Varkalak. The Varkalak chased him, killed him, and ran into the Forsaken one and inflicted multiple wounds, as you can see, on the Forsaken one, which caused combat to be drawn, although the Varkalak would be killed in the process, but certainly a fantastic return from that Varkalak, definitely the MVP of the game for me. So that was that, and then in combat over here, of course, the 2 Feldrek Elders and the Chaos Lord munched through the zombies in no time and overran into this big block here. So the question now is, can a big block of 47, I think it is, skeletons with support from these Halberdier skeletons here, can they hold out for 2 turns with the magic buffs that will follow? That's the big question. That's the end of Silas's turn 4. My movement 5 then, 1 charge on the flank of this Feldrek Elder with the skeleton Halberdiers. I've also moved the Necromancer into this back bunker here, just splitting them up. Don't want them to be in the same place. They're too tempting a target, really, if they're in the same place. Bit of chaffing with the bats to prevent the Barbarians here coming in on the skeleton Halberdiers, and dropping the Wraiths here to bother this unit with some reaping and then charge through the unit, because of course they've got the Ghost Step rule, and finish off these Warrior Knights for the secondary objective is the idea. That's the end of my movement 5. Okay, into my turn 5 here then. And I got 2 copies of Arise, buffing the units generally with 1 and then buffing just the skeletons with the other. In the magic phase, did a few wounds on the Barbarians with the Wraiths. And then the Forsaken one finished off the Vampire Knights over here, and the Skeletons, as you can see, crumbled. But because of the success in the magic phase, I've limited the damage here. So still not sure whether they will survive. They will gradually whittle away. It's a matter of how many copies of Arise I get off in my final turn as to whether this unit finally will collapse or not. That's the end of my turn 5. Okay, on to Silas's movement 5 here then, and you can see that he's putting as much distance between these two warriors and the wraiths as he can, because of course if he can get rid of this unit, then the secondary objectives are drawn unless I take out this unit. So he's trying to put a good bit of distance there, and of course I can't march because my vampire is too far away, so a charge is my only hope there. He's not gone after the bats with his warriors. Instead, he's coming down the side here and he's getting ready for a flank charge in turn 6 if the Feldrex and the Lord can't wade through all of them in his turn 5. So that's what's going on there. And then heading up this way with the Forsaken one to bring him to bear in turn 6. So that's the end of Silas's movement 5. Okay, end of Silas's turn 5 here then, and in the magic phase he got off Hellfire and killed off the bats, which is fair enough, and you can see that he won combat and ripped through a bunch more skeletons, but the skeletons did a stray wound on this Feldrek Elder over here, and so that is now decimated, so I'm happy with that as a return, to be honest. That was the end of Silas's turn 5. Okay, so on to my movement 6 here then, and I've realised too little too late that it was a mistake to move the vampire out of the unit. Had he been in there, he could be finishing off these Feldrek Elders now. And of course the skeletons would be crumbling at half the rate that they presently are, because he would be giving them stubborn. But it's too late now. I thought about, well, do I charge him in? But then I realised that he's going to crumble if I do that, because he would be going in as a single unit. So now I just have to move him out of harm's way for when this unit collapses, which is looking more and more likely. So I've brought him over here, got these zombies ready to absorb a charge. I cannot see that Silas will be able to rip through this unit, and I've backed off as much as possible to try and protect my Necromancer with sheer distance, but I have at least got the charge in the rear with these wraiths against the warrior knights over here, so that's looking positive for the secondary objective. That's the end of my movement 6. Okay, end of my turn 6 here then, and you can see that the skeletons would collapse, although I did get an Arise off them on them in the process. Silas was able to dispel all my other Arise attempts, but I did get Whispers of the Veil off on this Feldrek Elder, which would enable one of my Halberdier skeletons to inflict a wound on it and therefore cause it to be decimated. So that's something. Over here, the wraiths would beat the warrior knights, but only kill one, and the warrior knights would hold. They do get to re-roll their break tests, but at least they weren't able to reform, so I still have the rear over there. And that was the end of my turn 6. So Silas's movement 6 here then, and the real kind of news for turn 6 was that the Forsaken one here with his random distance only rolled, I think, 5, and he needed about a 7 on 3 dice to get in, so quite a poor roll there, which has caused him to fail to get into combat. So that's disappointing from Silas's point of view, but he has got into this second bunker with both the Feldrek Elder and the general, although he did take 2 wounds from dangerous terrain there, but that's not enough to decimate him, so a bit of a lucky escape there. I'm not sure I would have done this, because if one stray wound goes through on this Feldrek, which is unlikely, but it only takes 1, then the Feldrek will die. So I'm not sure this was a wise decision. But anyway, there he is. So that's the end of Silas's movement 6. Okay, so end of Silas's turn 6 here then. And the Warrior Knights up here were finished off by the Wraiths, so that's the secondary objective looking like it's going my way. The Lord and the Feldrek, as you can see, would get into combat with the zombies, but just not be able to kill enough of them. And this Feldrek is still locked in combat with these skeletons here, who would fail to do a wound on him, which was a bit annoying, because he's one wound away from being dead. So that was that. But Silas didn't have any spells to cast. Couldn't get past my dispel dice. He only had one eligible spell, so no spells were cast. And that was the end of the game, in which Silas had got a 13-7 on damage done, but I got the secondary objectives, and that brought it back to a 10-10. As you know, I like to reflect on games at the end and think about, where was I lucky, where was I unlucky, where did I play badly? There were a number of times that I played badly in this game. I think my use of the Vampire Knights in the middle was very dithery, and I deserved to lose them. But my biggest mistake by far was moving that Vampire out of combat, because if he'd have been hanging around in combat, he'd have finished both of the Feldrek Elders without doubt, and that would have won me the game. I positioned the Banshee quite poorly, as I mentioned early on, and that, I mean, it's only 155 points, but they were still thrown away. I do think I was a little bit unlucky not to finish off the two Feldrek Elders, who were both on one wound at the end of the game, particularly as those Halberdiers have got 11 attacks at strength 4, AP 1, and the Feldrek Elder's currently at resilience 5. I expected that Elder to die. And that's a 600-point swing. But then Silas was also unlucky to not have his Forsaken one get into combat here. So I think the luck, as it were, balances out. Turn 4 onwards really went in Silas's favour, as you would expect from a Warriors of the Dark Gods army. But the reality for me was that from that point, my skeletons were facing both the Lord and the two Feldrek Elders, and should have been the Forsaken one as well. And what that's telling me is I'm not doing enough damage early in the game, and I'm having to absorb the full impact, when really I need to be doing some damage to some of those units before they get here. So yeah, that's the takeaway from me for what was an enjoyable game that ended, as I say, 10-10. That's it for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you for tuning in, and I will see you next time.